time, by the way, there was a time that we were doing everything on paper, and then we wanted to make sure the judge had written the name in the right place and all of that. But since it's electronic, and since we insist on the judges to first put the names in the right slots before the debate, there really isn't a need for it. But if you guys still want to do it, go ahead. You're not going to lose any points. It just doesn't make sense. If you want to replace it with something else, that would probably be more in your interest. Okay, so okay. So now we come to defining the topic, right? So how do you define a topic? First of all, you have to know that what is the reason to define the topic, right? Why are we defining the topic? We define the topic to limit the topic, right? We define the topic so that we can limit it to a certain, it has to have a purpose. It has to be limited so that we can, it can't be too broad and it can't be too narrow. There has to be, if it's too broad, if you don't limit it, right? Then what are you talking about? Like, for example, we did a debate in my, I think it was called high-rise buildings are not needed, right? High-rise buildings are not needed. And I think my students who did it are here probably. And so they were talking about all kinds of high-rise buildings, commercial ones, apartments, decorative ones, the Burj Khalifa, all of them. So the point is, if you're talking about apartments, it's a whole different thing with apartments, right? It's about living, the style of living. If you're talking about corporate offices, it's different. So it's very important to kind of define, to kind of narrow it down. So defining here means to limit it, right? So you need to have a purpose. So you need to see, why am I limiting it? And again, you should have a reason to limit it. So for example, if there is a topic that says exercising is good for your health, that's not a good topic because it's very biased. But let's say for a minute, and then someone says exercising is good for your health, and we're going to limit it to 6 to 12-year-old people. How does that help you? If it doesn't help you, why are you limiting it? You could use it for adult. All the arguments you're using are valid for every age group. So there's no reason to limit it like that. But you do need to limit it when it's too broad. So you have to think in your head, like, what are the other things that might be that, you are basically drawing a target, right? And saying, attack me on this target, right? If you make your target really wide, you'll get attacked more. But if you make your target smaller, it's going to be harder to attack. And you want the clash, right? You want the clash. If your target is really big, then the clash won't be that optimal. So it needs to be. We need to have the clash. So, any questions until now? Raise your hand if you have a question, please. I don't like when there are no questions. Thank you, Khadija.
If the proposition fails to define a topic well, does the opposition then get to?
Okay, so we'll be getting there soon. But again, there are different formats of debate, but in our format, no, they don't. But we'll get to it. We'll get to it when they can redefine the topic. So basically, so we get that, we understand that idea, right? About defining, there has to be a purpose. And the second thing here is, so when you're defining the topic, you're basically interpreting the topic. There are two things mainly there. You identify the issues that are to be debated, tell the nature of the scope, and the second is to clarify the concept. So let's say you're clarifying the concept. So the first thing, for example, we talked about affirmative action, right? What does affirmative action mean? What does it mean? That is a concept that has to be defined. If it is something like a school should ban uniforms, you could define, you don't have to define school as it is a building where education takes place. Don't define it. Don't give me the dictionary definition for something that everybody knows. But if you want to define it, as in you want to limit the scope and say we will talk about elementary schools or we will talk about middle schools, Again, do it if it serves a purpose. Don't do it just for the sake of doing it, right? So you have to clarify the concepts. And so when in that clarification, you look at the dictionary definition and the context, right? But only do it if it's needed. And then, and especially there are words like better, right? Those are words you must define. If you say, for example, you know, pizza is better than a burger or something, right? So in what sense is it better, right? You can say it's better. It doesn't mean you have to give your points in that, but you have to give an overarching thing, right? When we say it's better, we mean it's healthy, right? Or when we say better, we mean it's more enjoyable. And then under enjoyable, we could say it's healthier, which gives you long-term enjoyment. It is tastier, which gives you short-term enjoyment, right? Then you go down there. But you have to give an overarching reason for what better means. If you just leave the word better like that, especially when you say things like those topics, the value topics, more harm than good. Again, what kind of harm, in what sense? It's important to identify those things, and that's where the context comes in. So in context. So what did I say? Don't limit the topic for the sake of it. I think I said that already. Don't give definitions of words unless useful argument, right? So unless it's, I think we talked about this. Anything else here in defining the topic? I think what else do I have? Okay, so basically these are your two things. You have to, I know they look like three here, but there are really two things. You have to identify the to be debated, limit the nature and scope, and then clarify the concepts through the dictionary within context. Now, what kind of definitions not to do, okay? So the prohibited definitions are those definitions that have no clear logical link to the topic, of course. So for example, if you're, yes, Fatima, sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Oh, sorry, you're just answering it right now.
Okay. So, so if there's no clear or logical link to the topic, for example, if your topic is high-rise buildings are not needed, and you start talking about, well, the high gas prices are not needed, that really isn't a logical link, right? Or if you talk about, you're saying, well, debating should be online, and then you start talking about, give me a crazy definition. Who wants to give me a crazy definition? Raise your hand. Come on, somebody. Who's funny in the group?
What was the definition?
Debates should be online.
I don't know, internet outage.
Okay. There's a little link there, but it has nothing to do with debate. It has nothing to do with, so that's, of course, that's like a given. I think you can take that. That's easy. The second one is anything that is like a tautology, or it's self-proving or truistic. These are all words that kind of almost mean the same thing. That means it proves itself. For example, if your topic is tomorrow is another day, right? Say tomorrow is another day, and you define it as tomorrow means the day after today. The day after today is another day. It becomes a fact, and so it's not debatable, right? So if something is a tautology or something that proves itself, it's not debatable. So that's can you guys give me another example for that? Anyone wants to try? Give another example of defining a topic, which would be a tautology.
Kit Kats are good for you, and then they say that cats are not edible. I don't know.
If cats are bad for you, right? Then say they're not edible. Yes, something like that. Or you can even have an unfair, maybe not completely this, but an unfair definition where you are put in a position to prove, for example, that killing is okay, right? Or something like that. or you're put in a position where the opposition has to say it's okay to steal, for example, right? So you have to see that, and then there's an unfair place set. An unfair place if they set the place or the time unfairly. So, for example, if you're talking about uniforms in school, and you say, I am talking about the Iqbal Memorial Trust School in Kashmir. You have no idea what that is, right? So you have to look at who the people in front of you are, who these people are. Or you say, I'm talking about, the school in Timbuktu. That's a little unfair because people don't know that. Or you might even say, I'm talking about, even if you say something like, I'm talking about in this movie, a particular movie, like if it says, for example, you should not adopt kids, right? And then you say, we're talking about within this movie, they should not have adopted the kid. Not everyone watches every movie, right? And it's totally okay for you to say it's unfair because we have not watched the movie. That's it, It's unfair to set the place or the time. The time, again, is unfair. If you, for example, if somebody says genetic engineering should be welcomed, right? And you set the time 100 years in the future, right? And you say, well, in 2000, we're now in, 2200, and, we have solved this disease and that disease. Hello? You're just making it all up, and it's kind of like an unfair place setting. Or in the past, or if you put it in the past. For example, if you say, if the topic is, let's take something in the past. We could say, violence is needed, right? And then you go in the past and you talk about the Battle of Badr, right? And of course, violence is now, in retrospect, you're looking at it, it was needed at that point. So you can't, or for example, if you say prohibition does not work, right? And then you go in the 1920s when America had prohibition and it didn't work. So though it's basically that would be kind of putting it into a fact or into a fantasy. So those are the things that you can't do. Then the general principle for you when you're defining a topic should be that I want a good debatable topic. I want to be generous to my opponents. I don't want to be stingy, right? I want to give them leeway. So when you're defining a topic, sometimes under pressure, you're like, let's define it like this. Oh yeah, that's great, it works. Without thinking, what's the opposition going to say to that? Because sometimes opposition has nothing to say. You're putting the opposition in a position where they have to say that it's okay to kill people or it's okay to steal. So I remember this one topic was you must clean your room. And they said something like, you must clean your room. In general, you should keep your room clean. Something like that. Well, obviously, how the other side has to say, no, you must dirty your room dirty. They can't say that, right? So it's important. And sometimes you might have topics that seem a little slanted. That's okay. You be the generous one and you make it debatable. Okay? So you need to be generous to your opponents. This is a general principle of debating, by the way, being generous to your opponents. Like, for example, if the opponent hasn't said a point really nicely, right? Be generous and act like they said it and then refute it. Or if they slipped and they made a mistake, don't catch them for the mistake. Be generous, because your whole idea is what you want to debate, right? You're not here to just catch somebody and trick somebody into something. No, you want to debate. That's the difference. You want to debate. You want to actually, your minds, to show the superiority of your thinking, your analytic reasoning and stuff like that, right? Okay. Okay, that's about contesting the definition. Don't contest it just because you don't like it, but I think we're going to get there. So let's go to the next one. Now I want to do a few examples here. Okay, I want you guys to try and define for me a few of these. Okay, I am going to call upon you if you don't raise your hands. So we have a few debate topics here. Oh no, wait a minute, what happened here? Did I? Yeah, there are the examples. So that uniform should be implemented. Let's think of Let me hear from someone other than Rayan. That's okay, Rayan. I really like you, but we gotta have others to talk to. So let's hear some definitions here. Okay. What do you think? How would you like to define it? Okay. Should I just call out names? All right. Ifat Chaudhary. Oh, Khadija has her hand up. Khadija Ahmed.
I was gonna say that maybe you could define it in like specific age groups or schools, so like middle and high school or secondary and elementary and middle or something.
So then which one would you prefer and why?
Maybe like in middle and high school, because there's a lot of peer pressure and stuff happening there with like how you dress, how you act and stuff. So if at least the dress is uniform throughout all the students, then it'll help that maybe.
Relieve the
When kids are
pressure of
younger.
it.
Yeah, because when kids are younger, it's not as bad, I think.
Right. So what would your stance be there if you did that?
Stance would be maybe that to relieve pressure on students.
Can you go bigger than relieve pressure?
Make a healthier learning space.
Good, like healthier, yeah. To create a healthier learning environment. So now you just gave the stance and then you limited to that. That's right. That's a good one. So remember, your definition should be defensible. You should be able to defend why you defined it that way. And it needs to be an informed position. That's what you have to show yourself. It's defensible and reasonable and informed. The second, what example do I have? Another example here. High-rise buildings are not needed. Who wants to give me a definition for that? That high-rise buildings are not needed. Okay, if no one raises the hand, I'll call one of the names I see. Okay, Rawan.
High-rise buildings are not needed because they're bad for the environment.
Okay, so you are giving me a stance,
Oh,
right? So definition would mean to narrow it down, to limit the scope. So I forgot to mention a very, very critical thing. Limiting the scope means you have to tell us what falls within this debate and what is outside of the debate. So for example, when Khadija talked about middle and high school students, then you cannot bring elementary school in, right? You cannot bring military in, right? You can't bring hospital nurses in because she limited it to that. And that's why it's important. Imagine if the uniform should be, what is the topic? What was the topic? Uniforms. Can you guys see the screen? You can see the screen, right?
Its uniform should be implemented.
It should be implemented. So what if she didn't say anything? What if you didn't define it? What would happen? So she could come up and talk about schools, and the other side would come up and say, that's okay with schools, but what about the military? It'll be chaos if you don't have uniform. And then the second speaker will come, well, we didn't talk about that. Well, you didn't define it. You left it open, so I can bash you now because I'm going to talk about the military. And now it's too late. And then, of course, you can try to say, well, we weren't talking about that. We didn't mean that, but you should have said it. And then if the third speaker will come up and say, oh, really nice, they decided to switch their definition because they realized that they were losing. And that's the reality then, right? So you have to always think, when you think uniform, don't just go quickly to one thing and get stuck, right? Try to think, what is a uniform? Close your eyes. I used to do this with my debaters. Close your eyes and think about each word, uniform. If you give it like 15 seconds, you will immediately go from one place to another. You'll go from just thinking about schools to you will start going to thinking about the army. You'll start thinking about where else is uniforms, you know? If you just give it a little thought and then you get a broader perspective. So Rawan, you gave us, you said that high-rise buildings are bad for the environment. So that's what you would have to, that's your stance. Like you want to limit this, right? Because if you just leave it open, you have to define what does needed mean and what does high-rise building mean, right? So let's try to do that. Who wants to give me that? Raise your hands, guys. Okay, no hands. I'm gonna call somebody. Khadija, did you raise your hand? I see a cup in the corner. Okay, let's have Haneem Shafi. Haneem, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes. How would you
Um, uh,
Yes, go ahead.
okay, I'm not sure, but I guess it's like, how would it be like a building, higher than like an average like apartment?
Okay. So you have to define the whole thing. So if you say that high-rise buildings is apartment buildings, why are they not needed? What do you mean by not needed?
Um,
So you have to tell us basically what is this going to be about, right?
mhm. Oh, okay. So like,
Okay, is it okay if I ask Nusrat?
yeah,
Okay, go ahead, Nusrat. You have something. Nusrat Samiola.
Could you repeat your question for me, please?
Oh, I thought you raised your hand.
Yeah, I was pointing to the next term. So
Oh, okay. So we're talking about high-rise buildings are not needed, and I want a complete definition. So
okay.
Haneem said about apartments. She said that high-rise buildings are apartment buildings, and now we need to define the word needed.
Yeah, I can. One of the idea I had is to say the high-rise buildings are not needed near the airport or the major, other than the metro areas.
Okay, so you want to say that's a good one. So you're defining it in the sense of you're not defining the word needed necessarily, but you're constricting the thing. So you're not saying not all high-rise buildings, but just close to the airport and those kind of areas. That's another way of limiting it. Yes, Fatima. And obviously, I can see where it's coming from, right? There has to be a reason for it. Yes, Fatima.
Maybe like we can survive without them.
Okay, so not needed means that we can survive without them. Yes, so not needed means we can survive without them. And if you want to leave not needed open, that's kind of okay too. At this point, there's more to come, by the way. So let's go to the next one. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to let all of you think for a little bit, and then I'll ask you so that we're not waiting for people. So the next one is that America needs to change its foreign policy. So I'm going to let you all think about it for a minute, or a minute's fine, I think, a minute or 2 minutes, and then we'll come back to it. Okay, go ahead, think. That way everyone would have thought about something.
Yeah, I can volunteer for this.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, America needs to change its foreign policy in terms of trade. and immigration. Can I cluster those kind of topics, or?
So if you said trade and immigration,
Yeah.
so now those are two things. Which one?
Two things. So in that case, I would say immigration.
Right. So you could say American immigration. Perfect. Because the thing is, if you have two, think about it, we won't have an effective debate, right? And
Yeah.
Which one are you going to do? It's this two problem.
Right. Yeah.
Rayan?
I have a question. So in the case of this definition, right, like that America needs to change its foreign policy in terms of immigration. How like the opposition wouldn't really have known. There's a high chance that they wouldn't have known that the proposition would have defined it as immigration.
Right.
So when they come up with their points during the debate, how do they bring up the statistics or other like supporting evidence?
So that's a good point. That's the difference between parliamentary debate and other debates. So parliamentary debate, although it helps to have statistics and stuff, it is not given as much value as your logic, okay, and your thinking. And that's the difference. So I know that a lot of students would love to have a lot of statistics, but in general, those are your given topics, right? If you have, like, let's say you have given a topic that was given before, right? Then you have all the chance to study it. But if it's not given to you, then you're stuck, right? So then we usually give impromptu topics that can be defined, that can be defined in ways that throughout the opposition, we give those as impromptu, so so the one side doesn't get too much time to prepare. But that's the whole beauty of it. The opposition doesn't have to prove the opposite, right? They only have to break down your case. So because of that, they don't necessarily need a lot of stuff. Having said that, I want you to always remember that if you guys could keep yourself well read, right? If you guys can all the time try to keep yourself abreast with what's happening in the world, then that will make you better debaters, because you will have more general knowledge and a broad understanding of the current issues in the world. And that is important. If you guys could do that, that would definitely, then you don't have to necessarily go Google and bring out some statistics, but rather you can just pull out of your pocket whatever you already know. But remember, parliamentary debate, especially this one that we have, is heavily based on your logic, your reasoning, your lateral thinking, and all the creativity, but not on statistics, right? So there could be somebody who has all the statistics, but they don't have powerful reasoning, and they will lose this debate. And there could be someone who's just giving examples about, their neighbor, and they could win the debate. So just never, in fact, that's why we give impromptu topics. In fact, that's why we don't want to give too much time, because once the kids, that sometimes the statistics becomes their crutch. That's all they could say. They feel nervous without it. It's as if, you can't walk without the statistics. That should not be the case here. You want to rely on your mind more than you want to rely on statistics, okay? So, and of course, you're right. Usually, the opposition does not know which way this is going to be defined, for sure. Should we do the next one? That Islamic schools need to have an hour of Arabic each day. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a minute. Okay, before I call on somebody, I'd like like to say, among the adab of online is that you do turn your camera on if you're talking to somebody. That's kind of right? If you're on the other end, you'll realize it's kind of unnerving not to even know who you're talking to. So when you're going to speak, I'd like you guys to turn your camera on. It'd be nice if it's on all the time, but if not, that's fine. So if any girls have to grab their hijabs, now's the time to do that. And I will comment on. Okay, 1 minute step coming up. So the topic was, what was the topic again?
Schools need to have an hour of.
Right, Islamic schools in Tampa. Okay, so I'm asking Max. Max is saying. You there, Max? Is that your name, Max?
Yes, we are calling one, so I didn't do small.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'll be going on and off.
Go ahead, Max. Do you want to define it?
Just patient is not the way you go inside. What should you rest?
Sorry, it's jobs in a bit.
Got a lot of background noise. Do you want to go, Max? Then put your thumbs up. If you don't want to go, I'll ask someone else.
I'll prefer to do it later.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
Let's have Salsabil or Amir. With us, Salsabil? Oh boy, see, this is why I need to know who's here. Ifat Chaudhary. It's also out of adab to just say, no, I do not want to say it, instead of being quiet in case you're there. Salsabil. Ifat Chaudhary, are you here? Okay. Maureen. If you guys are not here, then maybe I can remove you. Is that a good idea? So I know who's here or who's not here. Maureen, are you here? Are you with us? Okay.
Yeah, hello, this is Max again. Sorry, can I understand the question, please?
Yes, Max. So we were trying to define the topic that Islamic schools should give 1 hour to Arabic every day. Do you want to define that for us?
To define it to me?
Yes, go ahead.
Honestly, I'm lost. I'm lost.
Sorry?
I said honestly, I'm lost.
Okay, so let's have Noah define it for us, and then we can see. Then ask me any question if you don't understand.
So
But
like, should I
So
define it?
defining, hold on a second, Noah. So Max, defining something means to limit it, okay? So now Noah is gonna go ahead. Go ahead, Noah.
So you could do like Islamic schools should give Quranic Arabic, like 1 hour of Quranic Arabic every day, instead of
Okay,
just general Arabic Quranic Arabic, to like understand the Quran.
so he defined the Arabic as Quranic Arabic. So he specified what kind of Arabic. Anything else? You want to say which Islamic schools, maybe? Could you do that?
I was thinking of making this topic that Islamic schools need to have an hour of Arabic each day in non-Arabic speaking countries.
Okay. So usually, I mean, that might be kind of, does it help you to do that? Because obvious, that's kind of a little obvious, right? So if it doesn't help, then what's the point of that, right? But if you were to say in Western countries or in, the thing is, here's where you might run into this tricky problem. If somebody were to say something like in India, for example, or in Southeast Asia. And people could say that you were, unfairly placing the object, placing the topic, right? You place setting it, we call it place setting. Your place setting is unfair. Whereas if you said in the United States or in the Western hemisphere, then it's not. Because we are kind of here, and how are we going to know the nuances in India? Somebody could come up with all kinds of things and we wouldn't know, right? So, so I think we're doing okay until now. If you can see, there's some policy debates, right? Some of these are policy debates, and I don't think I have a back debate. Let's do the user must pay though. Who can do that? The user must pay. Who would like to define that? The user must pay. Think of a topic where you can make this define the topic. You have to define what is the debate about. Now this is one of those metaphorical topics, right? Where it could be just about anything. Just about anything, right? Okay, I'm going to ask Ahlam Badru. Are you there? Okay, if you guys are not there, why am I talking to you? Okay. Who else wants to say it? I have Rayan, but I'm not going to ask him yet. I'm going to ask someone else. Okay, Hafsa, Dr. Walla.
The user must pay once and or monthly.
Okay, let's say you say the user must pay once. What are we talking about, right? What am I talking about? What kind of user?
Of any app? I don't know.
Okay, good. So you're saying the user of the app must pay, right? So apps, in other words, you're saying the app should not be free, right? That's an excellent definition. The user must pay. So you have to, so otherwise, if you just say the user must pay and leave it open, people could talk about just anything under the sun for user, right? They could talk about apps, they could talk about using libraries, they could talk about using public parks, using, there's so many things we use in our life, right? So that's an excellent definition. Anyone else wants to give a different definition for the user must pay? Yes, Rhea. Now I can take it.
That the user must pay for any amenity, any non, I don't know the wording. Any non-survival, no, any amenity that's not must pay for any amenity that's not a necessity for survival.
Okay. So this is really broad, though, isn't it, Ryan, right? So this could be, for example, college education, healthcare.
Well,
right?
I define it as survival necessities.
Right, healthcare, a lot of healthcare is not survival, right? College education is not survival. So basically what you are excluding from this is water, housing, food, and clothing, right?
Yeah.
So much else. You could talk about library use, you could talk about public parks, you could talk about so many things we use, like the apps, and then which one are we debating? So it would be way too broad. Salsabil, can I get yours?
Users, every user of a public library should pay at least once to get inside.
Okay, should pay. Okay, so you want to limit it to public libraries because, and then you'll have to give your reasons, right? So that's a good definition. Abdurrahman, yes. Abdurrahman.
That the user of parking lots must pay.
Okay, users of parking lots must pay. Very good. Rawan?
Wait, I forgot what I was gonna say. Come back to me.
Okay, while you're thinking, the reason we say this is because you also want to think that do I have points for it, right? Don't just say something and you don't have points for it, right? So try to find something that you'll be able to support. Max?
Yeah, government vehicle must pay when accessing the expressway.
Sorry, could you repeat it? Scott?
Government vehicle must pay when accessing the expressway.
Okay,
Must pay the toll when accessing the expressway.
the expressway,
Yeah.
do they not pay right now?
Most government vehicles are normally exempted when accessing the expressway.
Okay,
For example,
that's an excellent thing then. That's a very good debate topic. The government employees must pay for accessing the expressway.
expressway.
Perfect. That's a good one. And I'm sure you have enough points for it. You know, you can talk about equality, you can talk about, the privilege and stuff like that. Yes, Rawana, you want me to come back to you?
I think I remember. Okay, so users must pay for public services if their salary falls below minimum wage.
You mean above minimum wage, right?
Well, yeah, if it's like is it like 40K? Is that the lowest?
No, it's much
No. Yeah, I don't remember what it was.
Isn't it like 12K a year?
Yes, no,
Really? Oh my God.
40K is fairly decent. So, so
Okay,
you're
well,
saying
yeah.
what you want to say is that public services should be paid for by people who make more than a certain amount of money, right?
Yes.
And it should be free for others. So what you're doing is you're saying this is included and this is excluded, right?
Yeah.
So that's fine. That's fine, but it's a little bit like Rayan's as well, because there's a lot of services. But I guess if you just say public services, and then at least we know that it's government, things given by the government, so it could be okay. All right, anyone else wants to chime in on this one, or we can move on? Is there a reason people keep dropping out and coming back in? Seems like. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Break the TV. Who wants to do that one? I haven't heard from Amin Yassin. Amin Yassin, do you want to answer that one? Muhammad Jallo. Is that Jallo? Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. Okay, not there. Who wants to say break the TV? Come on, it's a nice one. I'm sure you guys can find it.
So vague.
Sorry?
It's so vague. It's like it
What,
sounds more like an order. Like break the TV.
It is an order, right?
Yeah.
So it's a policy debate, obviously,
Can
but
I
it's calling for some action. Yes, Noah.
break the TV? Like you could kind of like sort of define it as restrict electronic use or digital input or something like that in your life.
If you did that, you know what you're doing? You are broadening it, right? You're making
Oh,
TV
yeah.
into electronic, and you're making break into restrict. You're actually broadening it, which is not necessarily wrong, by the way. You can do it as long as there's a connection, right? So no one can tell you, oh, how are you? This is TV. Why are you talking about electronic devices? You actually can do that. Raya?
We could, well, assuming that we define like individual words and we define break as like the purpose of breaking to be recycling, we could say that, we could break break old TVs, break broken TVs in order to make new ones. I don't know. It's weird.
It's not such a good one, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. How would you debate that, right? Nuzat?
Break the TV if it does not have power saving mode option.
So are you actually going to say break the TV? Like break it?
Wait, can I ask a question?
Sorry, what did you say, Noah?
Oh, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So wouldn't broadening it sort of be better? Cause like say for example, like you're doing like break the TV, like detox from social, detox from like electronics. Couldn't you have like more points about how electronics and like
I told you that was a good definition. I told you.
okay.
Because in this case, I mean, you can do it, definitely. Because sometimes you can broaden it. Because you're still talking about one thing. Even in your broadening it, you are limiting it to one thing, right? It's not like you have, now there are 10 things. That's why we have to understand the purpose. As long as we are able to hone in on what the topic is, right? Sister Nils, you want to clarify? You know, you were talking about breaking. So to talk about, like, let's say breaking the TV, right? I think that would be a little bit, maybe not so, how should I say without sounding, but it's a little childish to say it that way, right? So what does breaking symbolize? That's what you have to look at.
Destroy.
It could be destroy. It could also be just, you know, when you break something, it means it's not needed anymore. You could remove it. Maybe you could say, you know, we don't need TVs anymore. TVs are obsolete. That's what it could be about, right? Because nowadays we don't need TV anymore. Everything's on demand. Why do you need TV? So it could be any of those kind of things.
Thank you.
And then we have, I wanted to do one that says better. I didn't give that as an example. So let's say pens are better than pencils. Somebody define that for me. Pens are better than pencils. Yes, Hafsa.
Pens are better than pencils when note-taking.
Okay, when note-taking, but do you have points for that? Why would they be better?
Because if you make a mistake, you could erase. I don't know.
That would be because pencils are better than pens.
Oh, my bad.
So you have to see why you're defining it like that, right? So let's hear from Ifat Chaudhary.
Pens are better than pencil to do signature, because if you do signature with your pencil, they can erase.
Okay, so let's say that's what you're saying. Let's say you're talking about that. Now, remember how I said make it bigger? Like, what will your thematic opening of that be? Like, what are you talking about when you're talking about signature? What are you talking about? Who could tell me that? Like, what is the greater idea behind it?
Can you repeat that again?
So I'm looking for what is the greater idea behind the idea of, you know, if you do it with pencil, it could get erased, it could get smudged, right? What's the greater idea behind it? Because pens are better than pencils, because what? And this is, I'm talking
more reliable.
Because for
Yes, Sumaya? Sumaya, did you say something?
This is Khadija, sorry, but I said more reliable.
Sorry? More reliable, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I'm kind of looking at. When this is where the stance comes in, right? Yes. Who else wants to? Are these old hands or new hands? Raya, Noah. Were the hands put up before, or are they just put them up?
Well, you could say that maybe pens are better than pencils for the environment.
Okay.
And you can make a list of arguments, and then as well as the opposition.
Okay. What about the word better? So better, what you're saying is better for environment, or what Khadija said is more reliable. That's what's better, right? So if you can prove that it's better for the environment, then you prove that they were better. If you prove that it's more reliable, then you prove that they're better. And then you'll have to have points underneath that. Noah, do you want to say something?
You could kind of also define it as like, instead of taking the literal definition, couldn't you define it as so pens, for example, they're more permanent. So being more certain or being more fixed about your decision is better than being like, what's the word? Better than being what do you call it? Like uncertain about your decision and like being more, is it like stay like, can't get the word, like staying more firm on a decision is better than being like confused.
Yeah, being
Sort of.
wishy-washy or something, right?
Yeah.
No,
I couldn't get the
excellent.
term.
That's actually a very nice thing. You could say, but it wouldn't be good to make it as an action. You'd have to make it as a person. So people who are strong opinionated people are better than people who are let's say, I don't want to say the word flexible because that sounds too nice, or who are weaker. That sounds not generous to the opposition. Let's think about it. How could we say that?
Fickle-minded.
Fickle-minded, exactly. So you could say strong, yeah. So that's actually, no, that's a very good thing, is thinking out of the box, and that's a very good definition as well. Okay, so I think we'll skip this one because our time is actually going very fast. Let's go to the next slide. So now we're talking about what I think Mariam, did you ask, or someone asked, what happens if they have not defined it well? Okay, so the very first thing that you need to know, and most things in debate, it depends on whether the opposition calls you out on it or not, right? But judges do have discretion on a few things. Number one, the judges do decide whether or not your point is weak or strong, right? If you have a weak point, weak argument, they keep it in their mind, this is a weak argument. Now, if the other side doesn't refute it, it stays, but they still know it's a weak argument, right? So in the end, if they have to see who won, and there are two arguments here, they have to decide this is a weak one and that's a strong one. Similarly, in definitional debates, as soon as the proposition comes up with a definition, the judge decides whether or not this definition is acceptable or not, right? It's important for the judge to do that right away. So it's not really about whether the other side, will oppose you or not. It's really the judge decides whether it's a. So if the opposition says, "Oh, that definition wasn't fair" or whatever, and the judge doesn't think so, then that's too bad for you, right? But they'll still have to do other things. So what happens is the proposition has to get a defensible definition, right? They should be able to defend their definition, why they came up with that definition. They should have an informed position. They should have a position that they can basically, just like one of the definitions that came up, I said, what would you say? What are the points? And there are no points, right? So you need to have a defensible and an informed position. Now the opposition, your default is you take the definition, okay? Because it's not about what you like. It's not about what you prepared. It's not about whether or not you have, your statistics on that point. It's just the only thing the opposition has to see is if it's unreasonable or undebatable, right? So if it's undebatable, like we talked about it, if it's a tautology or it is the place setting or the time setting is unreasonable, or if it's unreasonable in the sense they're asking you to defend a position that's unethical or not politically correct. Politically correct is also very important in debate, right? So they can't ask you to, for example, defend racism or slavery, right? So for example, if there's a topic that says something like something about slavery, and these guys say, oh, well, we're talking about slavery is bad. So then they're putting you in a position to say slavery is good. You can't do that, right? Even if you can have points about how slavery, you could prove how slavery was good at certain times, but it's not a politically correct topic. They should not be putting you into a position where you have to prove slavery was good. So then what happens is, so then the opposition, if it's undebatable on one of those things, the opposition has to come up and actually say why that's the case, right? They have to say it's undebatable or it's unreasonable, and you have to state they're putting us in a position to say this, or this is true, like, how are we supposed to, sometimes, like if the opposition comes up and says, If the topic is like TV should be banned, and they say, our TV is bad for you, and they say it's bad for us three in the team, right? What are you going to do? They're the ones who can say if it's bad for them or not. You can't say it, right? So things like that, then you'll have to give that reasoning, and the proposition has to come and defend that reasonability, right? They have to say, no, it is reasonable. And so never come up with a definition unless you know why you've said it, and it needs to be beneficial to you. Although it should have a point in defining it that way, and you should be able to make sure that it's not one of the prohibited definitions. However, once that happens, it's always better to still say even if we take their definition, and then you refute the points that they're stating. Because if you don't do that, then you're basically going on parallel tracks and you never meet, right? And one person is debating A, another is debating B. There's no point of that. So you have to, the even if argument is, you just go and you say even if that's the case, because you have to have a clash. And then again, you don't know if the judge has accepted your side or not, right? So you rather defend both sides. So I think Khadija asked if the proposition doesn't define the topic, can we define it? So no, that you can't, because, and let me tell you why. If the proposition doesn't define at all, but they'll be talking about something, right? That's their definition. So for example, if the proposition doesn't define the uniform topic and starts talking about, school kids and this and that, so that's what they're defining it as. Now, again, I gave you an example. You could come up with military uniform. You can still do that. But this is what they're defining it. So if you want to be generous to the opposition, that's what you can say. But if you want to point out that, hey, they didn't define it, you can do that as well. But you can't redefine a topic. So if they have defined it in a certain way, and you have no reason to redefine it, then you can't redefine it. And if one of these reasons are there, like it's unreasonable or undebatable, then you can offer another definition, but it should be turning their definition into a reasonable one. So for example, if they have not talked about, for example, high-rise buildings, they have left it open and they haven't talked about it, or one of those things, let's say affirmative action, right? And they haven't, then you want to talk about African Americans, then you can bring that in. And you can say, and you can give examples of that, right? So instead of saying, we're going to define it as African Americans, if they left it open, you can just bring up every example about African Americans, and guess what happens? That's what it will become. It will become what you defined it as. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Are we all here? Okay. So we move on to the next thing, which is important now. So if you remember what happened until now, right? The person started with the thematic introduction, kind of gave the overarching value thing. Then they stated the topic. Did I even say that? I think I may have skipped that slide somehow. They have to state the topic. You have to state the topic only because you want to make sure you're saying the right topic. It's happened before that the first speaker should say the topic. I think I missed that slide somehow. Yes, you should say the topic usually just the first speaker, unless you have a reason to restate the topic, right? So if you want to say the topic is this, but they're talking about this, that's okay. But every speaker doesn't have to start by saying, this is the topic, this is the topic, this is the topic, right? And usually the last speaker will always bring it up again. But you should always refer to the topic, but you don't have to start with that except the first speaker. And then so you've set the topic, then you've interpreted or defined the topic, and then this is kind of part of the whole thing. Then you should go with a background. So then what you do is, then we come to the background, right? You have to kind of say, why did I pick this information? So for example, if you are talking about, if you say that we're talking about affirmative action about the African Americans as far as going into college, right? As far as college admissions. Then you, once you've said that, you've defined it, you come and say, the United States has suffered from racism for so long. You know, this is how many people are suffering. This is how many people, and this is how many African Americans cannot go to college or school, and this is the kind of situation they're in, even though they are qualified, even though they have the intelligence and all of that, but because of this reason. You give a context and you say why you're debating this topic, right? So you give a little bit of history, give a little bit of context, tell us why it's needed, this topic. And by doing that, you're already manipulating the crowd. By doing that, you're already putting the crowd, your audience, in a place where they're already agreeing with you because your background is telling why you defined it that way, right? So you don't want to say too much background, don't go into the whole history, but whatever is relevant. So all of these steps are going to happen within maybe, the first 1.5 to 2 minutes. Okay, so it's not something that you have to say for a long time. It sounds like it, but it's very critical to do this. It's very, very critical to set the stage like that. Okay, so you do the background. Like for example, if you were doing the app, the one with the apps, right? So you could say, nowadays apps are, everyone's on their phone. Just say, why is it relevant? Why am I talking about it? Everyone's on their phone nowadays. And when you have apps that are free, you get bombarded with all kinds of, advertisements that is detrimental to you. Therefore, just this little bit, it's just one sentence, but it's important for you to say that. And then the fifth one, and this is a little bit tough and it doesn't have to always happen, but it would be nice to give the burden of the proof statement, which means, and I think most of you who have been in debate before, that the burden of proof lies with the proposition. What does that mean? Who wants to tell me what that means? Raise your hand, please. What does it mean, the burden of proof lies with the proposition? Anyone other than Rayan? If not, I'll take you, Rayan. Let me see if somebody. Okay, we'll take Rayan. Go ahead.
I believe the burden of proof statement, maybe I'm mixing it up, but I believe the burden of proof statement is basically what the proposition will have to prove in order to win the debate. And if they can make that statement clearly, then it'll make it easy for the judge to analyze whether or not if they proved it and thus won or not.
That's right, perfect. So the burden of proof statement is actually telling the judge that, hey, judge, if I prove this, then I win the debate. So sometimes it's like, if I prove that this thing is more likely to be true than false, then I win the debate. If I'm going to prove to you that this is essential for justice, then I win the debate. If I prove to you that it's, whatever it may be that you are going to prove to them. And that's basically called the burden of proof. So the burden of proof means that the burden is on the proposition. The proposition has to prove something. Opposition only has to negate it. They don't have to prove the opposite. They only have to negate it. But so the proposition should be giving this burden of proof statement. Sometimes the opposition does it too. The opposition might say, if I can show you one example where this is not true, then I win the debate, right? And that's totally fine. Yes, Noreen, you have a question?
Yeah, but you just answered it. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Oh, because before I couldn't unmute myself.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was the question again, Noreen?
You just answered it. I was just gonna ask, do you actually say that in the debate?
Yeah. So it's good to say it. It's good to say that because that way you are telling the judge what to judge you on, right? So the don'ts in this is don't be too tight on yourself, meaning don't make it so difficult for yourself to prove something. And also with the opposition, like you can even say the opposition is going to have to prove this. we have to prove this. These are all burden of proof statements, right? And you don't always have to spell it out, but if you spell it out, it's still good. And then, so now we move on to the next thing for what the first speaker has to do. Now, you know, even though this is for the first speaker, right? But you guys understand that this has to be for every speaker, right? Every speaker needs to have understood this fully. And then these things are only for the first speaker. Then you have to give the plan of action. So now you have said, you have told them what's worrying you, why this is important, and what exactly the debate is going to be about, right? Now you tell them the plan of action. You showed them the roadmap that I'm going to say this. My second, how are you going to structure? How are you going to attack this? So you have to kind of say what your second speaker is going to say, what your third speaker is going to say. I mean, sorry, second speaker, you can say what you're going to say. Now, the don'ts here. Don't say my second speaker is going to bring up his own 2 points, and my third speaker is going to wrap up the debate. I know what the roles of the second and third speakers are as a judge, right? The judge knows that. You don't have to tell the judge the rules of the debate. So that does not look nice. So instead you say, my second speaker is going to show you how economically it's beneficial, and I'm going to show you how politically it's feasible. Or I'm going to show you how it helps the students' self-esteem, and my second speaker is going to show you how it helps the parents, right? So that's how you do it. You say exactly what the person is going to say. Say the title of their point, right? And definitely don't say my third speaker is going to summarize, because we know the third speaker, what they do, right? So you don't have to say anything about the third speaker. There's no reason. And then, of course, there are people who like to say, my third speaker will tell you why we won this debate. Hey, you just started the debate. How do you know you won the debate? You don't know you won the debate. So it's a little arrogant, and there's no reason to say that, right? So you can just say, you just don't say anything about the third speaker. And the second speaker could say, okay, and I now leave it to my third speaker to carry on, or something like that. That's okay. But when you are showing your roadmap, you don't need to mention the third speaker, because they're not doing any particular thing. So you want to kind of, does that make sense? Any questions on that one? Okay. Now, then you make your case. Now, this is the bulk of your argument, right? This is the main body. These are your points. So you have 3 points, 2 points, whatever points you have. And I'm not going to stress on this, because I think this is what you did with in the first workshop, right? Talked about the AREs, talked about the arguments and how you give your 3 points or 2 points. And only thing that I would like to say here is make sure you have a structure, right? Make sure there's structure within your speech. So there has to be a structure within your team. Like, I'm going to talk about the economic aspect. My second speaker is going to talk about the political aspect. That's within your team. Then you say, I am the economic aspect, and I'm going to show you how it's good for the family and how it's also good for the community and the nation. My first point is family. My second point is community. My third point is nation. And then you go. So kind of do that. So I'm not going to spend too much time here. Of course, you know the AREs. You should have assertion, reasoning, evidence. If anyone is totally new to today and doesn't know what the AREs are, I think you will be able to see it. We have a link on our website that shows you the first workshop, and he describes it beautifully in there. Then we have, what do you not do? Don't split one argument between 2 speakers. So what does that mean? For example, I'll try and think of an example. For example, if we talk about exercising is good for health, if that's your point, right? If your point is that to exercise is good for health. So the first speaker will talk about how it's good for the health of the mother. Second speaker talks about good for the health of the child. Both points are it's good for health, right? And so you're splitting one argument in 2. That's not wise. Okay, every argument should be complete. But even in actually that way not. Sorry, I'm taking that back. That's not a good example. Let me tell you what a good example is. it basically is when one person is saying half of it and the other one's saying another half of it. In the case that I gave you just now, both of them are giving a complete argument. One is giving it for adults, one is giving it for children. But I'm not coming up with an example really quick. Sometimes one depends on the other, right? And that each person should have complete arguments. So I'm not coming up with something, so I'll just move on. If it comes, I'll let you know. Okay, so how many points should you have? You should have 3 is the maximum, I think, for the first speaker. If you have more than 3 points, try to categorize them and have 2 or 3 is the most that you should have. I don't know what this third don't is. Let's keep going. We're running out of time. And finally, there should be a conclusion. Every speech has to have a conclusion. So try to practice your conclusions so that you don't just say, okay, and that's it, I'm done, you know. Try and kind of say, come up with some kind of a conclusion to the point. So I think, let's see, where are we on time? Yeah, it's 1.5 hours. I was planning on 1.5 hours. If there's any questions or did I forget something? So if there's any questions, I'm here.
Ma'am, thank you so much for sharing all your perspective.
You're welcome. But I'll just see if there's anything else that I need help with. No questions? Okay, then we can end with the speaker part and sort of answer. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم.
جزاك الله خيرا. السلام عليكم.
Alright, ورحمة الله وبركاته.